On one side of that park. You'll see it to the left. Yes, you see it. Okay, bye.
How's your day? So I'm going to have you speak first. Oh, really? You want to go first? Okay. Start local and go national? You guys think so? I'll go next. Good session last night.
And I'll try to get you to what it is. It's comparative to do a good job locally. You need to get out of there.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
I'm with the Alternative Media Center videographer too, but I didn't bring the camera because I didn't think I could impose. Would there be any way that I could work with you to maybe get a copy?
Oh yeah, sure. This will be
Later time?
archived on our UStream, and I
You're
can
gonna
I can
Ustream
upload
it?
it. I'm UStreaming it.
For the organization that's
Yeah,
running it.
yeah,
Very
but that'll
good.
be archived there, and then I can upload it to YouTube and everything. And
It's great. Okay,
yeah.
I'll get it later.
Okay.
We're starting shortly. The crowd come in and they get it, we'll start.
Okay.
You're going to get quotation behind we just check one more time, make sure.
Yeah, I think because we need to get started.
One of these chairs? Okay, I think we'll get started. We're only 7 minutes late so far, so that's not too bad. My name's Kevin Zeese, and with a lot of other groups, our organization, It's Our Economy, helped organize this. We want to thank people for that. I want to thank specifically Stephanie Geller, where is she? There she is, for getting us this space at School Social Work. It's a great space, and we have really very functional meeting rooms that you'll see later. And it's really great to be able to do this event here. It's a great school and a great opportunity to work here. So you can get information on It's Our Economy, these little cards out front. If you want to see more about what we're doing, get involved in that. It's a project of popular resistance, which is this card. Very nice, snazzy looking card. You get that out front too, and that's a group that's trying to really help create a mass movement to really transform the country in a more social, economic justice direction. The It's Our Economy project is one that focuses on democratizing the economy. In fact, we've held 2 other economic democracy conferences on a national basis, and this is our first local one. And we really want to focus locally because that's where the real action happens. We have to build this kind of system from the ground up, and we hope that this conference is the beginning of an ongoing effort of people working together to create a new economy. I want to first off, I'm only going to speak briefly, and then I'll introduce our 2 speakers this morning. I'm still a little foggy though, and so I want to apologize if I'm not as clear as I could be. Margaret Flowers and I have been sleeping outside at the Federal Communications Commission for a week, trying to protect net neutrality. And I think we're going to win that battle. We have made a lot of progress in the last week and a half. Even though the commissioners voted to move ahead with their plan, two of the commissioners are really on our side. We have one commissioner we have to convince over the next 4 months. I think we can do that. So I think we're going to win that battle if we get organized to do it. But sleeping outside in an urban area with a highway nearby, even when you think you're sleeping, you're not. And so I'm feeling a little delirious from that, and not recovered from that still. But in my delirium, I wanted to try to think about this conference and what we're trying to accomplish. And it kind of gave me, what I did was I kind of looked forward 10 years. Where could we be if we are successful? And it's really, the potential is amazing. We can really create amazing transformations if we follow the paths that we're on now and build on the work that's already being done. I mean, you can imagine Baltimore having scores of worker-owned businesses where workers are sharing in the profits from their work rather than money just going to the capital behind the project. Sharing the wealth, sharing ownership creates an incredible base. I could easily see scores in the next 10 years, easily happen. I can also see the economy that's no longer based on oil and gas and nuclear energy, where energy is dispersed across the city on people's homes and parking lots, on businesses, producing their own energy, more efficient housing, and even profiting from that energy. So rather than all the money going to an electric company, it goes to the people themselves. And again, that's a part of the sharing and creating a wealth across the country, across the city. So I can imagine that easily. And then we have, we all know we have these tens of thousands of abandoned houses that are vacant. There's tremendous opportunity there. And so when we talk about things like land trusts, where communities take that area and organize it under a nonprofit themselves and develop it in their own needs rather than developers' needs, it's a whole different vision of us having more control over how our communities develop. And I think that's also very powerful. We have the resources here. We have the vacant housing to develop in ways that could really create wealth across the city. And then I think about also I'm not a big fan of our city government, I gotta say. And it seems like a very machine-oriented government. But I am a big fan of seeing what we're seeing around the country with this participatory budgeting, the beginning of much more than just elections. These elections in the United States are very manipulated. We live in what I would call a mirage democracy. And I think the research now is starting to come in to show that we really have our democratic legitimacy. Academic studies now showing democratic legitimacy is in question. We are really not, even Jimmy Carter says we're no longer a democracy. Even Stephen Breyer in the dissent in McCutcheon says we're losing our democratic legitimacy. Senators are saying that the banks own the place. When we try to stop foreclosures in the Senate, they say we can't do it because the banks own the place. I mean, so our democratic legitimacy is in question, so we have to do something different than representative democracy. You know, somehow improve that, of course, by getting money out of politics. That's a big project, but we can do more at the local level with participatory budgeting and participatory decision-making. That's what land trusts basically are. It's a participatory decision-making process for a community to develop its area, but the participatory budgeting process has been beginning to be used around the country. Also, give people more power over deciding how money is spent in their community, how tax dollars are spent in their community. And we also have to start to create structures outside of government, our own assembly, our own community assemblies that are making decisions. We have a lot of power in our communities that we don't realize. And I've seen other cities where communities get together and they look at the problems they face, they also look at the strengths in their community. And every community has some strengths. And you can build on those strengths. And of course, the first strength is its own people and figuring out how to use the skills and the value of the people so we don't waste any human resource, because that's a tremendous power. So the vision is quite incredible for what we can be. And when I look at this conference, when we started organizing this conference and started talking to people in Baltimore, we see that there are a lot of people thinking this way about certain aspects of it. There are people working on land trust, people working on cooperatives, and the other issues I mentioned. But what we want to really do with this is make it broader than that, to see that all these things are connected. That we can move these issues individually forward more effectively if we recognize we're working toward a broader common vision of an economic democracy and a participatory government where people have more control of their economic lives, more say in the direction of their community is going, and more sharing in wealth and ownership. And that's where we want to be. So I hope that we look back 10 years from now and see that people in this room, and that does mean every one of you, were energized by coming together and sharing a common vision, and that we then can work toward that vision together, and we're really proud of the work we did over the next 10 years. So that's where I hope we end up, because I hope this is the beginning of it. Our first speaker has been doing this kind of work for a long time. John Morris is the Dean of the School of Urban Planning and Community Development at Sojourner Douglas College. He's been deeply involved in efforts by residents to revitalize the Old Town community of East Baltimore, and you can see more about him in our booklet with a more detailed bio. Thank you all very much for coming, and please welcome Dean John Morris.
Good morning. I'm going to put up a PowerPoint, and I'll give you some background on it, because I'm going to share with you what we tried to share with the Masters of the Universe in Baltimore City, the corporate community of Baltimore City. They didn't want to see this, but let's talk about it. What we do at Sojourner, in terms of community economic development, is ask an imaginative question, which I think everybody in this room is smarter than the so-called Masters of the Universe to get. That you can build an economy, you can build a city on people. In fact, that's all a city is. A place where people live together to thrive. Now, we've forgotten that idea, so we're challenging that, looking at Baltimore. And what we were doing is thinking through what we typically do in Baltimore. I was at an event last night in which a number of people were talking about their imaginative possibilities for the Jonestown community, which is a community that's just to the east of downtown, just above Fells Point. And they were talking about, with all the excitement and enthusiasm of what the possibilities were, they were talking about a building. Okay, and they were talking about what they could do for the people, and they were talking about social work. Now, what you have as it exists are essentially 3 legs of a 4-legged stool. Business, which does what it does, government, which does what it does, and the not-for-profit community, which does what it does, and is not doing a job very well for the mass of people we know. And they're trying on those 3 legs to build a sustainable city, and it isn't working. Now, here's a problem of Baltimore City. If you look at Baltimore City's median household income compared to the 23 other subdivisions in Maryland, you'll see we are next to last. The median, essentially, the midway point in household incomes in Baltimore City is 23 out of 24. How about the median value of owner-occupied dwellings? There's Baltimore City again, third from the bottom. Now, if I were one of those masters of the universe at that presentation yesterday, you know what I would say? Because we're talking about property. The first slide is about people. Talk about property. I'm as imaginative as can be. I go opportunity. I can buy low and sell high. From the previous screen, I don't know what to do because I'm not very good at developing the prospects of people or of seeing them. How about educational attainment in Baltimore City? That doesn't look too bad. We're kind of in the middle of the pack. But despite the fact we're in the middle of the pack, we're still one county from the last in median household income. So something's not translating to produce the kind of living we want. Well, let's look at this one. This looks interesting. The average weekly wage from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Baltimore, of all the 24 subdivisions, Baltimore City is fourth highest, behind only Montgomery County, St. Mary's County, and Howard County. That sounds pretty good. It also sounds crazy. How can you have the fourth highest average weekly wage and the second lowest median household income? We're going to get to that in just a second because there are really two Baltimores. But think about this. 10 years ago, this is what the picture looked like. It's even crazier. Baltimore City had the second highest average weekly wage of all 24 subdivisions in Maryland other than Montgomery County. At that time, it was still the second lowest median household income. 10 years ago, it was just ahead of Somerset County. Today, Somerset County is ahead of Baltimore City. Well, let's look at where Baltimore is most competitive with the other counties, and it's in poverty. The percentage of Baltimore City's population that's below the poverty line, over 20%. More than 1 in 5 persons in Baltimore City is poor. That leads every political subdivision in Maryland. How about the percentage of people over 25 who didn't finish high school? Look at the state there too. So let's think about this. What's so stabilizing about this economy that the masters of the universe were trying to sell to everybody else to come here and locate? We lead state jurisdictions in the percentage of adults who never completed high school. We're kind of in the middle of the pack in terms of adults with a graduate degree. We lead all state jurisdictions in the percentage of the population in poverty, and we have the third lowest rank in owner-occupied dwellings. Fourth highest weekly wage, second lowest median household income. There's nothing about that that says, in conventional terms, this is a place you can develop. I'm going to turn that around. For reasons of why you're here, there's everything about that that says this is a place where a thriving, moving economy can rise. That's because you're smarter than the masters of the universe. Now, what complicates Baltimore's stability? This is the picture. Race. You can only make sense of that picture if you separate the numbers on the basis of whether you're talking about black citizens in Baltimore or white citizens in Baltimore. Consider this statistic. This is crazy. Look at the percentage of Baltimore's adults who have a position in management, business, science, or the arts. See, there's Baltimore City right in the middle, but if you remove the black population, white Baltimore, third highest. If you only consider the black population of Baltimore, percentage is at the end. Baltimore is a very strange place. But look at this chart. The disparities are even more striking. If you look at the percentage of people who are counted by the census as being employed, we're kind of 22nd out of 24. But if you remove the black population from that stat, you become 15 to 24. you increase by 7 places. The percentage of people age 25 and over with a graduate degree. Generally speaking, 11th out of 24, middle of the pack. You remove the black people, 3rd in the pack. The percentage of civilians employed in management positions, remove the black people, you go from 14th to 3rd. So if you are conventional in what you think you can sell about Baltimore City, and that's what you know, you can only make Baltimore City sellable by making the black people invisible. Now, unfortunately, as of the 2010 census, black people make up still more than 60% of the population. That's a whole lot of people who disappear. So the challenge then is not so much how you make people who you can't sell in terms of creating a vibrant economy disappear. It's how you make a vibrant economy with the people you have. Now, we got to change how we think, because most of us, I'm not just talking about the corporate them, I'm talking about all of us. When we look at the mass of people, we still view people as separate, as apart from what we do. We're doing it for them, not necessarily with them. They're static. If people are poor, all we've known them to be is poor. All they can be is poor. If they're uneducated, then we've got to educate them. They're incapable, and that's always the case. People are dynamic. People are an incredible resource. You know, if we're talking about our children, we don't treat our children at 35 as we treated them when they were 1 day old. People grow. How do we institutionalize that among a large population of people? And last, we treat people as passive. We do not make them active partners in our undertakings. Now, consider this. This is a picture from the master plan for Old Town, which is the neighborhood in East Baltimore where Sojourner Douglas is located. This is typical development visioning. What do you see about that? Antiseptic? You've seen that basically in every upscale community you want. And one of the problems for the people of Old Town, Old Town is a community which, from the standpoint of the census, is more than 85, close to 90%, maybe even beyond that, African American. Nobody sees themselves in that picture. If that's the future, where do people go? Now, we did a visioning of the people that produced this image. They didn't make the image. They crafted that image of what they saw of themselves. A vibrant marketplace of people engaging in commerce, of people adding value to the land, of people doing the things that attract other people. The difference between these two pictures, a number of things. Clearly, difference is who's doing the picture is one aspect, but another difference is imagination. Let's think about what happens when we're trying to build a community of people who have, and maybe have a whole lot, and people who don't have, and clearly don't have a whole lot. On the one hand, the people who have are going to make the decisions. And they'll be making the decisions for the people who don't have, validating it by their compassion. So I'm not knocking compassion, it's wonderful. I'd much rather have their imagination. I'd much rather have their willingness to accept that if I don't have, I can become what I aspire to be without the resistance of their telling me, oh, that's impossible because you didn't do it the way I did it. That imagination is generally lacking. It also is lacking among the people who have not a lot. And this is not a knock on them. They survive getting from day to day, dealing with the reality. Don't have the luxury of imagination to say, over time, here's what I become. Here's what I risk today not eating. And we all need the help to get beyond that, because we're all in that position too, when it was easier not to get up, not to do the things we did, become who we were. So, we got two Old Town possibilities. Old Town of new building construction that displaces an old population, or an Old Town of newly developed people achieving to their own aspirations, not the aspirations others may have for them, that emerges from an old population. This population displaces, this population transforms the land. So, we're trying to replace this school with a different one that adds a fourth leg, community, people in Old Town. And what we're doing in Old Town is building a structure to bring people together where people can participate, where people can be active, where people can connect and communicate. We've created a, not a community development corporation, a community corporation, which is to contain all the stakeholders in that community. People who live in Old Town, people who work in Old Town, people who may study in Old Town, may own business in Old Town. And one other component, people who just care about the success of Old Town. The difference between those two pictures is one other thing, the misalignment of interests. The interests of regular people and the interests of people who aren't so regular. And we've got an economy that benefits one at the expense of the other. That over the last several years, last several decades, those interests have become dangerously misaligned. And so the question becomes, and this is what this conference is about, how do you realign that interest? We'll talk some, because I think one of the things that Kevin raised was, why go with the local before we go to the national, which I was going to talk about? And in many ways, what I told him was, you want to fix Baltimore, go out of town. The solution isn't here. The problem is here. And if you want to see the problem, don't go out of town. Look here. We are ground center in the problem of America. What we're doing in Old Town is trying to create, and this is a word I don't like credit, but we've coined it to describe what we're doing. We're cooperativing the community. We're structuring the community through our corporation so that it functions like a cooperative, so that any enterprise, whether it is a housing co-op or just a micro business, necessarily takes the advantage of all of the benefits of cooperative economics, so that you can begin scaling out those solutions of worker-owned ventures, and you have a basis for community participation in the venture as well. And so we're looking at not just outside businesses coming in, but for creating self-employment models, where you've got micro enterprises of people who are their own business, who sell their own labor, to replace one thing that we talk about all the time in Baltimore. Where are the jobs? Well, I changed that. I talk about work. Work affirms. Work elevates. I don't know that if we were 150 years ago when we're talking about jobs, we'd be talking about slaves. Well, I'm not calling employment jobs, but here's the weakness of the employment model. How many of us out there are employed, work for somebody else? Okay. Now, let's ask this important question. What is your work worth? Within the employment model, your work is worth the lowest value of what it costs to replace you, not the contribution you add to the venture. That is part of the misalignment. The person you work for benefits from exploiting you, not necessarily your economic contribution to the work. We align the relationship you change the way the economy works. You change the misalignment. Think about need. Need is a driver of human behavior. Let's move our sense of need beyond tragedy to creating an economic opportunity where the neediest among us are able to work together, create enterprises where we meet our own need and reap our own benefit. And again, I'm not saying that the infirm should help the infirm, and don't want you to do that, but look what we have now. One of the younger people in our circle has coined a term that has gotten some disagreement and some unhappiness among the well-intended among us. They call it the nonprofit industrial complex. The array of helpful people who come into communities of poverty to save the poor, who leave with all the wealth, at least with a lot of the wealth that those in need could have for themselves and end their own neediness. Realign the interest to turn this thing around. Now, we are thinking about community not as a moral value, but as an indispensable economic component in development. Build it, use it, create an economy around it. All of the principles you're talking about, principles of economic democracy, are principles of community. Our problem is we can't sustain community. We're isolated, we're separate, we're passive, community is active. And we knew that once. Think about this. As I was talking with Ed earlier about what happened to how we publicly think about cooperative economics in America. The heyday of the popularity of these ventures seems to correspond with the Depression, the Great Depression, when it was okay for us to think that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things. Think about these movies. Every Christmas we watch It's a Wonderful Life. There could not be a more socialistic tract that was ever produced in Hollywood. But we revere it. So, as we're looking at this insane and which the local community rises up to save George Bailey, with a little help from a $25,000 advance from Sam. But cooperative economics works for you. Cooperative economics sustains community. Cooperative economic democracy makes democracy meaningful. So, before you go, I'm setting this up for Ed. This is Baltimore. This is an income inequality map of Baltimore from the 2010 census. So this is why we need to get out of town. Not to leave this, but to figure out what do we do to change this. So as you look at those menacing mountains of green, in the north it's old money, in the south it's new development. And in between is the rest of us, ready to be displaced. And what you decide here will help change that picture. So let me set it up, and Ed, please, knock it out the park.
You're welcome to walk around.
I do love that concept of menacing mountains of green, I must say. Wow, that was a great presentation, really.
Get that out there for you.
Go ahead.
Or do you want those menacing mountains of green still up there?
That was pretty
Let
cool.
me see, how do we get out of this thing?
I think you can turn it off if you want to, or put
Let's
up the.
just turn it off.
Yeah.
There. It's shutting. Hey.
Shutting down, good. All right, well, that was a great presentation to really give us a perspective of what we're dealing with in Baltimore. That was really excellent. Thank you so much for that, John Morris. And he's John was so right to talk about going outside of Baltimore. You know, this kind of conference that's happening is not only happening here. There's just a recent conference down in Mississippi that Ed was at, that he'll report on and tell us about that. But there's also similar conferences in Seattle, and all across the country people are thinking this way. And so I gave you that vision earlier of what we could be in 10 years. It's actually a vision that could be a national vision. And that could be a really transformational thing for us to see. Ed, our next speaker, Ed Whitfield, is a social critic, writer, and community activist who has lived in Greensboro, North Carolina since 1970. He's co-founder and co-managing director of the Fund for Democratic Communities. His bio is more lengthy than that, but I'll just mention my favorite part of his bio. He recently won the Plays the Most Instruments Award at Greensboro's long-running open mic night. So welcome the musician, Ed Whitfield.
Good morning. I'm really, really glad to be here. Excuse me for hobbling around a little. I did something to my knee. I think it's a combination of old age and twisting it the wrong way. But I'm here, and I'm glad to be here, and I'm really glad to follow John Morris's excellent presentation on some very specifics of Baltimore, but in a context that is really, really thoughtful and well thought. I really appreciate that. I did go back from 2 weeks ago. I was in Jackson, Mississippi at the Jackson Rising Conference that had probably 600 to 800 people from across the country converging on Jackson, Mississippi to talk about building new economies and transforming the old one. And it was an amazing gathering that some people there, including some people who've been in the cooperative movement for a very long time, said it was most likely the most comprehensive, best cooperative gathering that the country has ever had. And that's quite a statement, but it's entirely possible because, one, it reflected a kind of breadth of inclusion in terms of who was there. It was highly unusual for those gatherings. It reflected a depth of thinking that is becoming more and more characteristic of those gatherings, but it is still very, very present there. There were even international presenters from Zimbabwe, South Africa, Venezuela, who were part of the conference, both plenary as well as running some workshops. There were things for people just beginning in cooperative activity so that they become familiar with what it was, to other workshops on how step by step to begin to work to organize and form a cooperative. It was an amazing gathering. I'm still kind of impressed and inspired by it. But it's good to be here. I see a number of old friends out in the audience that it's good to see again. And I want to go kind of following after I want to go from the concrete to the general and then back again to the concrete, because I think he's touched very much on the concrete. But I want to talk in the general kind of way about just how we think of what it is that we're doing and why it's significant. And I like to think of this cooperative work as being finding a way to express our full humanity. Nothing less than that. It is really about our expression of our full humanity. And as part of that, we have our imaginations. We talked a lot about imagination. I think it's crucially important. We have the capacity to be creative. We have the capacity to be productive. We have the capacity, each of us, to produce more than we need ourselves, which is why the point he was making, which was a very eloquent version of Marx's theory of surplus value. But I'm not going to call it that, because he didn't, and I didn't notice that's what it was. But what he said, your worth is worth what it costs to replace you. That's it. That's what it's worth to the person purchasing. But what he gets out of it, he gets to appropriate the entire value of what you produce. Every exploitative system is based on that, the fact that every person is capable of producing more than it takes to produce them. They produce a surplus. But we have systems of ownership that allow people who own to appropriate the entire surplus, and others only to get that which it takes to replace them, which is why year after year after year, they don't get any more, and other folks are building up these green mountains that we saw in the, on that slideshow. So we have this capacity to be productive and to produce more than we need. We have a need for community. That's part of our full humanity. Some of us have drives toward being competitive. Some of us have urges toward being destructive. Some of us have urges toward being domineering. And those things find themselves concentrated in a certain class of people who own a lot of stuff. But then we also have these needs for food, clothing, shelter, and security that are part of the things that are largely unmet in this social system that we have that allows for these systems of ownership that only pay you what it costs to reproduce and suck in and keep everything that you produce, which is way large, makes much greater in value. One of the things I like to think about is connected to this also the question of power. Now, some of us are so nice that we don't like to think about power because we don't want to be those domineering folks that I was just talking about. But power is important because power has to do with capacity to, in fact, meet our own needs. That's a question of power, too. So when I was in late 1960s, growing up, before I ever got to college, I was kind of struck and captured in my imagination the whole notion of black power when I heard it explained that we're talking about black folks having the power to do the things in their community that they needed. I'm thinking to myself, this is just perfectly logical. This is normal. And then I heard people try to say that this meant hate. It's like, hate? How do you go from having the power and the capacity to meet your own needs? Does that mean you hate other people? Well, they're supposed to meet your needs, and you, I mean, what's going on here? And you see how words twist things around and try to generate a confusion. But the notion of power that I like to hold on to is that power fundamentally is our capacity to meet our own needs. And while we brag and have talked about and elevate and hold up people who have had the courage to speak truth to power, and we should, but we have to reach the point where we can be true to ourselves and develop the power that we have to have, the power that is necessary to meet our own needs. And that's different from speaking truth to power, because you can speak truth to power all day long, and it remains power, and you still can't meet your own needs. So this kind of movement we're talking about is a different movement. It's a movement that I think is rooted in the idea that we have the capacity to do for ourselves things that there's no reason someone else should do for us. You know, a lot of times we talk about rights, but normally by the time you get around to talking about rights, you've already given up your capacity to do for yourself that which you call for the right to make sure someone else, you know, we got a right to housing. Well, if I get an axe and some woods and some trees, I'm going to build a house. I'm not going to talk about my right to a house. But if I don't have access to the woods and the trees, and someone else has hoarded all of that and completely controls that, then I need to talk about my right to a house. Because I'm begging. Really, I am. I'm asking him to make sure he provides for me the thing to meet my needs. But we need to figure out, in the full expression of our humanity, how we can build a community where we are capable of meeting our own needs. And that's what the essence of this cooperative work that I'm concerned with, and I think we're all working on, is about. And it's really a radical notion without being, I mean, it's a radical to the extent that it gets to the root of what is the question. The question is this loss of control. So there's a national dialogue going around inequity, inequality. Everybody wants to talk about inequality. Some people just talk about income inequality. Other people go deeper than this and talk about wealth inequality. But it's inequality, and it's inequality as a measure, as a quantitative kind of relationship between things. That there's some things that are more than others. And inequality in and of itself just doesn't bother me, because most things in life are unequal. That's not the issue. The issue is that we have a social economic system that has allowed a small group of people to appropriate enough wealth that it prevents everybody else from expressing and meeting their full humanity. That's the problem. So for that, the question of how much inequality is too much is not exactly, because you can't talk about it in quantitative terms like that. Well, this much is too much, but that much would be okay. But you have to talk about the quality of what we need is to create a system where everybody has the opportunity to be productive, which means that everyone has access to the things that are required to allow them themselves to be productive. And as we know, we're all able to produce more than we need for ourselves. So now we have the opportunity to be productive, and we can be about a process of constantly improving our communities, elevating the quality of life, and meeting people's needs. That's the qualitative change that needs to be considered, as opposed to this quantitative thing about how much inequality is enough or too much. One person who, I guess, I'm going to call him a friend of mine, we don't know each other all that well, but he suggested that perhaps the question of how much inequality is too much or enough was something that should be left to ethicists and philosophers to decide. And I'm going, given their class of bias, why would we do that? I mean, you know, these are issues of community values that need to be decided democratically in community. They need the more voices in them, not the expert voices in them. So this has to be something we all decide. And I think what we all ought to be sticking with is reimagining a world in which we were capable of meeting our needs. It is the world where knowing how to fish will feed you. It's not the world we live in, because my contention is in the world we live in, knowing how to fish will leave you hungry. All you do is know how to fish. Somebody else has the fishing pole and the water hose. You know how to fish. Okay, that's cool, but you can't fish here, and you have nothing to fish with. The world that we imagine is a world where those who know how to fish have access to what they need. Now, has somebody said, give a person a ham sandwich they can eat for a day, but teach a person how to ham sandwich and they can eat for a lifetime, they would have been looked at as though they were a fool. Teach a person a ham sandwich. Isn't it wonderful that fish is both a verb and a noun? And ham sandwich is not. Because you say, well, let's go ahead and let's make a verb out of it. Teach a person how to make ham sandwiches and they'll eat. So all you do is you know how to make ham sandwiches. Well, do you have any ham? Do you have any bread? Do you have any aluminum foil to wrap it in? Oh, okay. Well, let's teach a person how to do all that. Let's teach a person how to grow pigs. Teach a person how to grow and grind wheat. Teach a person how to make aluminum. Well, do they have bauxite? Do they have large amounts of electricity? Do they have fields of wheat and the power to grind it up and the leavening to make it rise so they can make some bread? Do they have, the fields? In other words, you would know if you had said this about a ham sandwich instead of a daggone fish, we would have known years ago that this is wrong, that we are missing out the means of producing these things. But that's why the fish story works, though, is because the fish story is connected to our memory, our deep memory of a commons. And quite frankly, water and fish are among the closest things we have to a commons left. So at the point that there were these expanses of land, none of which were invented by or created by people. Land was here. There were these expanses of land that had animals on them, none of which were invented by or created by people. The animals were there. And it had trees on them, none of which were created by people. The trees were there. And the earth was there, and the minerals underneath the earth. And all of this was available to people in communities. And communities set up regulations as to how it would be used. I'm talking about a community having some regulations. I'm not talking about the tragedy of the commons where somebody immediately goes and cheats. And therefore, this means that you have to have private ownership to keep people from treating. The whole story of the tragedy of the commons is really, it was a very deliberate attempt at a particular point in time to confuse people around this issue of the need for reestablishing the commons by claiming that it won't work and getting enough folk running around saying it so it was almost dismissed. But you think about it for a minute. Commons existed for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years. So communities found ways to regulate, and our communities would have to do so. So the regulation of them is that people have fair methods of using that don't damage other people's means of using. I will tell you something. Even John Locke, in his second treatise on government, when he's establishing the legitimacy of private property, basically makes a statement that it's okay for you to go there and by virtue of your labor, take some part of the commons and claim that it's yours as long as you do it in such a way that it doesn't prevent other people from doing it. Now, That's in the second treatise on government. You read it carefully. I don't remember I won't cite the paragraph, but it's there. You'll find it. Somehow, people who have elevated this notion of the legitimacy of private property have left out the condition under which he said it would be legitimate. So we have to put it back in. That's just part of our work, is that if we are going to elevate our full humanity, if we're going to find ways to meet our own needs, we're going to have to transform systems of ownership in such a way as to democratize wealth. I think that, again, what he was giving part of my presentation before I could get up here, this whole notion of democratizing the economy. In particular, I want to offer that we want to democratize wealth, because this is what allows us to recreate the commons. It is the democratic control of the wealth of a community, which is to say, putting under the control of, by, and for the people, that would again allow us to have knowledge play the role we would like for it to play. That if you know how to ham sandwich in that world, and you have access to what it takes to make aluminum and to make ham and to make bread, you make mayonnaise, who knows? I don't know if y'all like it. Mustard? And you know that you have the ability to do that, then that is because wealth is democratized. As long as wealth exists under the kind of private control that it is, then wealth begets wealth. Capital begets capital. Capital will employ labor to expand capital, rather than labor employing capital to enhance labor and living and life. So our cooperatives we're talking about are, again, organizations of people organized around a common need to satisfy their social, cultural, economic needs and interests, but they are organizations of people, and quite frankly, that brings us back to the hardest part, again, which John talked about in his presentation, which is the question of sustaining community. And I would add explicit to that in the question of building democracy. So one of the things we know probably some of the least about is how to make democracy work. And why it is that we have a hard time figuring out how to make democracy work is each one of us sitting in this room and in every other room like this and rooms unlike this have had a different set of experiences in our lives. We have, on the basis of that set of experiences, drawn some differences in our views and values, in our inclinations and our proclivities, things we like to do. All of those things are different. So you have to get a people, all those differences, together and come up with something that they can do together. This may or may not be easy. No, this is not easy. And if anyone here has ever tried to build an organization, you know all the ways that it can be not easy. So then we have to learn. Because in the final analysis, if we're to have a commons, we have to, like other communities, regulate that commons, and we have to do it democratically. We have to do it in such a way that it is of, by, and for the people, and it allows them to meet people's needs. If we do it any other kind of way, we'll only recreate the system that we have now. And one of the easiest things for us to do is to recreate this hierarchical system, because this is what we know. So I'm in a community right now in Greensboro, North Carolina. We're working on in a food desert, trying to help people build a grocery store. You'd be surprised at some of the weird things that folks will come up with, because it's what they know, including the city government, who, was going to give the land that we wanted to build it on away to some slumlords who are already known to be people damaging the community, but that's just because they were developers and that's the way it is, and they had a lot of money and they asked for it. And so we have this system of economic development in a large number of cities that are largely governed by developers, where we basically say this: we got these social needs that are not being met by the market. The market is failing. How do we know the market is failing? Well, we got people who want a full-service grocery store, and no corporate grocery store wants to come in. It doesn't satisfy the economic needs and interests of the grocery store. Because they can make no money there? No, that's hardly true. The people in this neighborhood and the 2-mile area surrounding this community buy every week $1,343,365 worth of groceries, according to the last census figures. Every week, $1,346,365. We capture 5% of it, we can have a $4 or $5 million a year grocery store in that neighborhood, producing some good jobs, paying well above the minimum wage, having the goods and services needed by people in the community. It's not the other grocery business couldn't make money in it, they couldn't make enough money in it. So we only have to have a 2 or 3% profit margin to allow us to grow, be stable, and be sustainable. Others they want a 4% return on revenues. It's not a return on the equity. A lot of people take these tiny grocery margins and think, well, grocery stores don't make much money. That's return on revenue. That has little to do with return on equity, which is what an investor cares about. They want to know how much money do I get back for the money I have to put up. And they try to highly leverage their money in every way that they can. And so one of the ways that these other folk coming into the community wanted to leverage was to ask the city to give them a grant. They $2 million to do it. And cities do that kind of stuff. Because in situations where the markets fail to meet the needs, cities will guarantee the profitability to an individual entrepreneur and hope that some social benefit trickles down from his guaranteed profitability. They don't guarantee the social benefit and hope that someone can make a profit. They guarantee the profitability and hope that there's a social benefit that trickles down from it. That's the trickle-down theory that's dangerous.
Yes.
But one of the things that more and more people need to start approaching local governance for is that if you actually have the will, the political will, to want to do something about the social needs in the community, why don't you let the community be the developer? Why don't you let the community engage its own creative processes to gather together the needs and stuff from the interests of people, just like that incredible, I won't copy your slides. I can use those. That incredible slide that shows what the folks did, let that be the guiding vision to a community entrepreneurship that is then resourced with the necessary resources to allow this vision to become a reality. That's what should happen. And then, just like in the form of other development, where the developer ends up with the ownership, so that the benefits go to the developer, let the community as the developer end up with the ownership, so that the benefits go to the community as the developer. So this whole model of community as developer is one of the things that we really ought to be talking to cities about, that if you can guarantee the profitability of something that otherwise will not be profitable, then don't come telling us that, well, we're not sure you'd be profitable if you ask for a city development loan. You're like, well, you know that other folks weren't going to be profitable, which is why you gave them the land free to build theirs on. So we give us some free land the same kind of way, because with the same advantages, even with a worker-owned business. I want y'all to think for a minute, how does the surplus get sucked even out of the worker-owned business? There are two really, really key ways that it happens that we need to be working around in terms of, I keep hitting this microphone, I'm so sorry. That we need to keep working on in terms of allowing the surplus generated by labor to stay in community. One of those is in the form of interest, and the other is in the form of rent. Those are the two bleeding ulcers of even worker-owned businesses, or otherwise you get to keep the profit. So if you go in there and the rent's too high, and the interest on the loans that you were required to get your business up and running is too high, then the surplus is still going out in the community. So that's why we also have to be working around access to low interest loan funds and access to rent, either to land ownership, some stabilization of land, the whole community land trust is one of the ways that takes place. The other kind of ways that take place on the I'm running out of time. I'm out of time. Jackson was wonderful. If y'all want to ask us some more about it, I'd be glad to tell you. There's an RCC project in Greensboro, North Carolina I'm working on. It's really exciting. I can tell you about that. The Southern Grassroots Economies Project is something that we're working on broadly that has a money component trying to find financing for this cooperative movement that's going on, and of three types. There's some money, it's grant money that's going to be needed for technical assistance and other things that you will not get a return on, educational stuff. We give that out to the Foundation of World eventually. We're working on that. There's other money as loan money that needs to be available with very, very low interest, no interest sometimes, that we're working on stabilizing some ways to do that. There's another type of money that's required as equity-like investments and things, which would be more patient capital coming in. Hopefully we can find ways to develop that don't end up tying you to the equity holders in those situations where the ownership and control remains among the workers and the people in the community. But those are the kind of big pieces of financing as part of the work of the Southern Grassroots Economies Project. And I'll be around until this afternoon. And thank you so much for having me.
great presentations. Thank you very much, both of you, Ed and John, for getting us up to a good start. Now, on pages 3 and 4 of your schedule, you'll see where the next sessions are. We're going to be doing breakouts to really get more in depth in these, have more conversation. I want to urge the presenters at these workshops to make sure your focus is on dialogue with everyone in the room. We want these to be conversations that help us figure out where we go from here. And also, we hope that each session, we need to have someone who capable of reporting back. At the end of the day, we'll have a very important session, another plenary in here, to discuss where we go from here. Because a conference is not the end by itself. We don't want to just hold a conference. We want to transform the economy. And that requires all of us to continue to work together. And so what we're going to do when we focus at the end today at the plenary, we're going to be focusing not on all the details of your workshops, but more focused on what are the opportunities in moving forward, what are the challenges in moving forward, what are the next steps in moving forward. And so that's a very important session. I hope that everyone can make it through the whole day here and come back and participate in that, because if we don't have a plan for the future, then we haven't really accomplished our task here. So please keep your presentation short and allow for conversation. A lot of the issues that you'll bring up in the presentation, presenters, will come up in conversations. Don't feel like you have to keep a monologue. Let's have a conversation, and let's really focus on next steps for each of the areas we're talking about. You see, we're divided into very specific topics. So let's move on to the third and fourth floor here and get started on these more in-depth workshops. Thank you all very much, and thank you to Ed and John again for your great work.